Cheat on me with my best friend? I'll wreck your career and publicly humiliate both of you. Sarah have been like family to my wife and I for several years, practically ever since we moved in across the street from them. The four of us were extremely tight. Our kids are the same age as theirs and are all good friends. We were one big family unit. We did dinner together a few times a week. We went on vacations together. I truly saw as a brother, and my wife and Sarah were very close too. 5 months ago, I was completely blindsided by the discovery of an affair between my wife and. My wife had left her email open on our computer, and I saw an email from her to her longtime therapist saying that would be joining her at an upcoming session again. My mind started racing. Why in the world would be going to her therapy sessions without my knowledge? I did a search and found some other emails to and from the therapist proving that had been going to sessions together with her for about 6 weeks. I checked our mobile phone account and discovered that, since late summer, they had been exchanging hundreds of texts every day, peaking at nearly 500 per day by the holidays. Speaking of the holidays, my wife and I hosted both of our families, parents, siblings, etc., for both Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner, and Sarah joined us either for dinner or after dinner on both holidays. Text records show that the entire time that they were at our house celebrating with our families, my wife and were texting each other across the room. They were doing that pretty much every time the four of us hung out, for months. And, all day every day just in general. But what bothers me the most is that they were doing it with Sarah and I right there. I confronted my wife with the evidence and she admitted that yes, she and had fallen in love. It just happened. I don't know how. But I love him and I just don't feel anything for you anymore, I'm sorry. They had gone on a school district trip together, something had happened in her hotel room, and things had moved quickly from there. She explained, as I lay face down on the couch, unable to look at her, that they had already made plans to move out and divorce me and Sarah, and while they didn't plan to move in together immediately because of the kids, they'd probably do so eventually. The meetings with the therapist were supposedly mostly for the purpose of finding a way to break this to me and Sarah as gently as possible, because they were so very concerned for our well-being. Sarah and I are fairly certain that they weren't planning on telling us about the affair at all, and were simply going to discover their feelings for one another several months down the line, after they'd come up with some other reason to divorce the two of us. My wife moved out 2 months ago. I was, and still am, utterly destroyed. I cry every day. I cried writing the first few paragraphs of this story just now. I worry nonstop about the impact on our kids. But I am also not exactly a shrinking violet when I feel that I've been wronged. And in this case I was, objectively, very, very wronged. So, a couple of years ago, ran for a Board of Education seat as a pretty extreme underdog. I helped him with his campaign materials and debate prep, and my wife, a well-known school district employee, this becomes important later, got the word out as best she could. Much to our surprise, he actually won in a squeaker, by just a few dozen votes. Being on the board became the center of world. He joined every committee that he could. This turned into the foundation of his affair with my wife, as they were constantly going to school events and meetings together on evenings and weekends. Once I discovered the affair, my thoughts turned pretty quickly to revenge, and it occurred to me that an extramarital affair between a member of the Board of Education and an employee of the school district was at least bad politics and possibly violated district policy. Making things far worse for them was that my wife was in the running for an open administrative position, and everyone knew that she was more or less guaranteed the job and the major pay raise that came with it. She had just finished her master's degree in school administration, at the urging of her principal and the superintendent, so that she could be promoted to this specific position. I had plenty of evidence of the affair, texts from both of them admitting to it, text records showing that they were texting hundreds of times a day, emails to and from the therapist, etc. I considered simply emailing all of the evidence to the board and superintendent, but felt like I, as the grieving, betrayed spouse, might not be seen as a credible source. So instead, I invented a fictitious furious friend who was planning on showing up to the next board meeting and publicly shaming the two of them for their affair. I told my wife that I'd tried to talk this person down but couldn't guarantee that they wouldn't show up and humiliate them publicly. As I expected, this led to conclude that the only option was for him to preemptively admit the affair to the board. The superintendent subsequently recommended that resign, which he did. Sarah said that he was utterly humiliated and crushed, and barely got out of bed for a few days afterward. Once word of the affair and resignation started getting around, the superintendent, a longtime friend of both my wife and, contacted my wife and tearfully informed her that it was no longer politically appropriate for her to be promoted to an administrative position within the district. The position that had been lined up for her was later filled by an outside candidate. This sent waves of confusion and rumor throughout the district, as it was pretty well known that my wife was getting the job. The day after she was informed that she wasn't getting the promotion, my wife and I, despite our crumbling marriage, took our son out to breakfast together on his birthday, and a parent stopped by our table to congratulate her on her new role. She said thanks, then excused herself to go cry in the bathroom for a while. I let the dust settle for a couple of weeks, and then, right before my wife moved out, let them in on my little secret. There was never a furious friend threatening to expose them in the first place. Just me. Word of all of this has gotten around our fairly small town, which grew up in and my wife has worked in for nearly 20 years. My wife refuses to talk to me about how things are at work now, but I've heard from some people I know in the district that her formerly spotless reputation has taken a major hit. Formerly a gregarious social presence in our neighborhood and at events and pubs in town, has completely gone underground and barely emerges to mow his lawn. He's moving out soon, to a little townhouse which is all he can afford due to all the child support he's going to have to pay his wife. My wife and claim that they plan on trying to make things work together, despite all the public humiliation. I wish them lots of luck with that. I'm sure it will be a lot of fun to show their faces together in town. Story 2. I, 22M, saw a disturbing message my BF, 22M, sent to a friend. As I'm typing this I can't even sleep and I'm sick to my stomach. My BF got a MacBook that I bought him and he needed some help fixing something on it. I don't know his password, he never told me as he seems to be very secretive with that sort of thing, whereas he knows even my debit PIN. He logged me in and then went to the store. I had initial thought to even look at anything but after a bit I noticed the Messages app. Being a Windows user I didn't realize you could have a message on there. My curiosity grew, and I opened it up. I saw the name of someone I didn't know. I only know his inner circle of friends for the most part and even then I've never met most of them in person. I'm never invited to things with them. I couldn't see the entire message history, only the most recent messages up until it was installed. Looking through the list there isn't many contacts he's been texting lately, most of them I know but there's one guy I don't who's pretty close to the top. The convo was pretty tame I think, it seems the other person was sharing their frustration with dating. Two things in this convo really bothers me. The first being my BF telling this person something along the lines of I really feel that, I'm not in the headspace for a relationship. The other being the tone of the convo, my BF apologized to them for a late response literally at the same time I knew my BF was out somewhere and waiting for him to text me back. Maybe this doesn't sound too bad and I'm overreacting, but we have had a fair bit of issues in the past. One of my concerns/issues was that I don't feel like I have his undivided attention hardly. It was definitely a point of contention for me and I still feel that way but have sort of just dealt with it. It seems like he's always got someone else to talk to or message, even when I'm looking right at him and talking sometimes he will barely acknowledge me or ignore me. I've never had any trust issues with him but some of the compounding issues in our relationship have caused me to become very concerned if it will, or can continue. Sorry for the long and crazy post, but I wanted to provide at least minimal context to why this especially bothers me. I know what I did is up WND if I own up to it I really feel like it will be the end.